Welcome to Wine, Women, and Writing. This is Pamela Fagan Hutchins, and whether you've reached this show via Facebook Live or YouTube or SoundCloud, Spotify, Apple Podcasts, one of the bajillion ways that you can get it in one of the 70 countries that we broadcast to, I'm glad you're with us. This is the show where I talk with other authors about their books and their authentic, complex characters, the real life experiences they're based upon, and all that kind of good stuff. First, though, a few announcements before we get to today's very special guest, a good friend of mine. I wanted to let you know that you want to prepare for upcoming shows by reading the books so that you can really enjoy the conversation even more with the authors. Then you can go out and see the books that are coming, see the authors that are coming, and join us that way. And in addition, super exciting, I forgot to announce last week that I had the fourth Patrick Flint book come out in my Patrick Flint series. It's mystery, suspense, thriller, and I'd love it if you checked it out. And last but not least, I have one spot left in my advanced marketing and advertising virtual retreat for publishing success, which will be October 20th through 22nd. That link on the screen, which is bit.ly/capital P for Pamela, capital R for retreats, is case sensitive. Of course, if you're podcasting, you don't see that link. So bit.ly/capital P Pamela, capital R retreats. Now, enough of that. Let's get to the good stuff. I am super excited today to welcome Terry Shepard. Terry is the author of the debut thriller, Chasing Vega, which is mostly what we're going to talk about today. If you're on video, you see the lovely cover. And he's also a good friend of mine. So welcome to the show, Mr. Shepard.
Thank you so much, Pamela. It's great to be with you. I love to be on Wine, Women, and Writing. It's awesome.
I love that you're on it. And what I think is really cool is a lot of times I'll do these MESCAL Men and Mystery because I'll have a guy on and he'll have a guy protagonist. But with you, I can go either direction because you're a guy, but your protagonist is a kick-ass female. She's a detective. That's the right nomenclature for her. She's a homicide detective, right?
Yes. And I thought very carefully when I started writing this, that had this whole notion of writing thrillers about who I wanted my character to be. I wanted to create an ensemble cast to surround Jessica Ramirez that was as diverse as she was. I wanted to create a world where all the amazing people that we have out there can look at one of those characters and say, hey, maybe I can be a hero too.
Absolutely.
And I think, the jury is still out, but the feedback I'm getting is that that worked.
I think that is not only an authentic way to bring the world onto the page, to look out around you and create a cast of characters that represents our very diverse world, but it's also super good for readers because so many people get left behind by books that don't speak to them. They don't reflect them, and yours doesn't.
It's been great fun because that added to the research, the dimension of the research. And the highest compliments I'm getting is that some of these people that are in this space, for example, Jessica's sidekick, her partner in crime or in law enforcement is Alexandra Clark. And Alexandra is LGBT. And all of Colleen and my friends, women friends who are gay, are saying, now, have you been watching me? Have you been studying me and not telling me? Because I saw this in Alexandra's character. And that, I think, is a high compliment. The medical examiner in the story is on the autism spectrum. And, I have a number of friends who either have kids in that space or who are themselves in that space. And the emails have been so wonderful. They're saying, I never dreamed that it might be possible for me to become a physician. Or I can tell my kid, look, this is a guy who is the smartest guy in the room. He just speaks his own language. And they've learned how to decipher that and love him. and depend on him because he's crucial to help solving the case. So that's been part of the joy. The challenge, as you well know from your Patrick Flint series and the many books that you've written, is how do you build a story around that excites people and keeps them turning the pages?
Oh, and I have to tell you real quick, because I have a son that's on autism spectrum, that I love that element. And I love seeing that you bust not only their own perceptions, but other people's perceptions that they're not able to mainstream, because they totally are. And my son is always the smartest one in the room. But it is really both when you're doing a mystery, thriller, suspense, or really any plot driven book, that you have to have this authentic group of characters that then tell a cohesive story that drives people to stay in their seat, lean forward, and keep going. And so I know where you got the characters. In fact, I've got to put up a little banner I prepared. I know where you got some of the characters. In fact, the people in Terry's life that say, I wonder if you've been watching me, are probably right, because Jessica Ramirez herself is based upon one of your friends.
Yes. And when I was trying to decide who the heroine would be, I have from a previous life, I have a number of cop friends and a zillion cop stories. And one is Tracy Ruiz, who spent 25 years as a police officer and was the first Latina, one of the first females in, at the time, a very male-centric and chauvinistic culture. And the stories she told me, very few had happy endings. I mean, she's the type of person who will not be denied her dreams. And she's one of the most positive, amazing, loving people on the planet. But as she was telling me these stories on her way up, one of the ideas that I had was, well, why don't you let me tell some of those? And I'll just write a different ending, or I will write an ending. So there's a whole scenario in there that Allie talks about with Jessica's uncle, about how Jessica meets her love interest. And that story is true. It's a horrific thing that she had to deal with as an undercover cop. And up to a point, it is almost verbatim exactly the truth. But then I spin it. I give her a little victory at the end. I use it as a way to build the conflict between her and one of the guys in the chain of command that's trying to drum her out of the force. But it's a true story. And when I read that chapter to Tracy, she said, "Man, I wish I could make that real."
Oh, if we could only write all of our own happy endings. But to me anyway, what I love about fiction is that you can take what is real life and strip out the boring and the mundane and the unhappy endings and to make it anything you want it to be. So with the story behind Chasing Vega, how did you come up with that story that keeps us on our seat, that plot?
Well, when I decided that I wanted to write fiction, I mean, for most of my adult life, I have been a writer, but I wrote nonfiction. And when I decided I wanted to write fiction, I did probably what you did, Pamela, and that is that I immersed myself in research about the craft. And I very quickly learned the big three: cover, blurbs, and first paragraph. So I wrote the first chapter of Chasing Vega without even knowing where it was going. I wrote the prologue, where we meet the villain in the prologue and where she dispatches her first victim. And I didn't even
very exciting scene.
I didn't know where that was going, but I spent a lot of time with that and kind of immersed I read books about deaths in the Grand Canyon. I remembered my own experiences of seeing the beauty out there and built that first. And then talking with Tracy, I thought, well, what if we did kind of a fish out of water story where we took this Latina cop from the Midwest. She gets herself suspended for a meth lab bust that went bad and goes out to visit her uncle, who's this sheriff in Flagstaff, which encompasses the Grand Canyon. And what I learned from my research is that they have concurrent jurisdiction with the National Park Service for criminal activities that happen in the Grand Canyon. So you have these two law enforcement agencies that are trying to work together to solve this series of murders out there. And Jessica and her partner are thrown into this mix and actually given some things to do that are mundane. But as things begin to happen, the next law I learned from my friend Dan Brown is that you always throw a hand grenade into every chapter. So you build the character first in the chapter, you throw a hand grenade, and then you leave them with a cliffhanger at the end. So they got to turn the page. And when that started to happen, the story just flowed. I know this is the way that you sometimes have told me that you get the sense of your own creative artistry, is that it doesn't really come from you. It almost comes through you. You fill your mind with the research. You try and understand the characters to the best that you can, and then you just let them free, let them go free, and watch what happens.
I love that, and it is what I do is, and I sit with the story before I ever put anything to page, so that it has time to come through me, to develop its own life in the background. What I loved about this is I'm a sucker for great setting and throwing beauty that is also disaster into the mix. So you got that. You've got, by the way, and I told Terry this long ago, but I think that Alexander is just awesome. The character of Alexander is just awesome. And just almost steals the show occasionally, which is what you want. You want larger than life, characters that can come on and carry their load. But I loved that you put them in a situation where they had not the same amount of support and help that they would have had back home. They had to rely on themselves and each other. It was just had all the makings of really a great way to build a story and suspense. So hats off to you. You can leave yours on in case that's hat head there, but hats off to you.
Thank you. The part I think that was the most fun for me was that very thing, to try and find ways to put these people in unusual situations and give them puzzles to solve. The two favorite characters one of the things actually that I had to do in my rewrites was I had to give Jess more to do and give her more of a personality, because Tracy is buttoned down. If Jess was exactly like Tracy, Alexandra would be the star. I had to, put more emotion into the Jessica character and give her more energy and more fire. But the two characters everybody loves, they love Allie, and they also love Joey Price, the medical examiner. Yeah. Because this guy is a guy that has never been understood. He's bopped from job to job. He's still very young in his role, but he's in like his fourth medical examiner job. And because he's on the spectrum, nobody gets him. Yeah. But the sheriff does. And there are all these scenes where you get to, basically what you're doing is you're going inside his head and you're looking at the world from his perspective. And to him, nothing's wrong. I mean, he's absolutely fine with everything. He just has a different love language, a different way that he communicates. And when they figure it out, he has a mentor, an older doctor that's a primary care guy that has an interest in this kind of stuff, that hangs around. And that's a guy that, I don't know if you do this, maybe you do this, but in my stories, I always like to inject real people to give them some immortality. And one of my best friends lost her husband a couple of years ago. So I brought him back to life. He was not a doctor. He was a financial guy, but I put him in as Joey's mentor in essence. And he's the one that translates Joey for the real world. But the fun part with all of this stuff is to watch the dynamic of these people and how, I mean, this is part of it. The value, I think, in understanding human beings is to really get inside the challenges that they face. Their flaws are what make them beautiful. They're the battle scars that are just amazing, and watching how they overcome them and learn how to work in these worlds where these strange things are happening and prevail is what makes great stories.
And so, speaking of great stories, I know that as part of your journey here, that you formed a publishing company and that you have a second Jessica Ramirez book in the works. And so what's going on there? Is that something people are going to see this year, next year? Give us a teaser.
Well, they originally had been planned for September, but I had a very unusual thing happen, and that was the pandemic. And when the pandemic started, I have grandkids that are 9 and 4, and my granddaughter was born with Down syndrome. So they're asking all these questions about, what does this mean? What does contagious mean? What, will I get sick? What will happen? And so I wrote them a story. I wrote them a story to explain why we should wear masks, what social distancing was, how to wash your hands. And that became what we're calling the Mystery Bug Collection. It's two tales that we put together. The book is based upon the protocols recommended by the Centers for Disease Control and the World Health Organization, but I tell the tale in the poetic style of Dr. Seuss. So you have this picture book. Juliet and the Mystery Bug is the first one, but Juliet and the Masked Hero is the second, and Juliet is my granddaughter.
Aww.
So that project, which originally I was going to do as a one-off, I basically had one book printed for them, began to get viral traction. So what's happened since in that area, and this is something that I think, as we're talking about the marketing aspect of our work, is really important, is that you need to figure out creative ways to get your art to the audience. And I commissioned lesson plans for the classroom. So classroom teachers can go to mystery-bug.com, a website I set up, and download these lesson plans for free. They are based on the curriculum requirements of all 50 states. So you can use it for language arts, you can use it for poetry, you can use it for reading, and it'll work. And I'm working now on a research project with a major university and with the Mayo Clinic, where we're going to try and do a before and after test of kids' knowledge about these skills and habits, hygiene habits, after before they've had the Mystery Bug unit taught in class and after. So where that comes in with Vega, what do I think you'll find is interesting with this, is that when it came time to translate the book into Spanish, I realized something interesting, and that is that a straight translation of stuff like this just doesn't work.
Yeah. The
best books and the greatest authors find other authors that can tell the story in a way that audience, in this case, a Spanish-speaking audience, can understand. So my translator, who lives in Dallas, who is a PhD in foreign languages and teaches Spanish literature at the college level, is going to incorporate the Spanish language version, which will come out at Christmas, into her spring class. And they're going to do a couple of things. One is they're going to do all the typical things that you would hope that they would do with a piece of literature, and that is break down the characters, try to understand the story, figure out what the meaning is. But the second thing they're going to do, which is really fun, and I would love to see you do this with the Patrick Flint family, is they're going to give me a list of people who should play Jessica and the rest of the cast in the movies. So they're going to be a contest. 100 students will decide who should play Jessica Ramirez. So what do you think I'll do with that information when I get the top 5 names?
Oh, I think I'm going to call Netflix.
Yeah, well, I'm gonna float it with the stars themselves, through their people, and say, this is what your fans are asking for.
Half of them have their own production companies anyway, or more. So exactly, that sounds fantastic. Super, super smart thing to do, and it gets back to Ramirez and Clark have big plans. The publishers, the multimedia empire that it is becoming. I love it.
Well, this is your fault. This is your fault, Pamela, because I took your class. I took your indie publishing retreat. I mean, one of the things that I knew, my sister was for many years a publicist for 3 of the major publishing companies, and so I had a good understanding about what that relationship is like if you're published by a major. And what I wanted, I think, is the same thing you've said from time to time that you want, is that's complete control. I want to be able to decide who my narrator is. I want to be able to do my own covers. I want to choose my titles. I want the last cut on the edit. Yeah. And you can't do that with the major stuff, with the major guys, because what you're doing is you're selling them an idea, a concept, and it's much like Hollywood. Then they take it and make it marketable. So Ramirez and Clark basically is a company that controls the copyrights and is the, the protective legal entity that stands between me and whatever mistakes I might make. But I'm also hoping that as I get a better understanding about the craft and about the business, that perhaps like Skipjack, it can be a place where up and coming authors can get their start. I'd love it if it was a launching point. Yeah. You guys do that so well with your company. I love reading your authors.
It's rewarding. It's super rewarding. And, everybody's got their own dream. And some of them, that dream is just to put words on a page. Some of them, that dream is put a book in the hands of grandma. Some of them, it's, I want somebody else to read my book and attach to my characters. And others want to go all the way, like world domination. But having an ability to be a dream enabler is really a very cool thing. And that brings me to something I want to be sure that you guys do circle back and know. And that is, you can probably already tell that Terry is so positive and he's so driven. And it is going to be no surprise to you that you got your writing start where? In inspirational self-help.
Yeah. And even that was, that just kind of happened. I spent many years as a corporate guy, and I would write these messages to my team. I had a very, very large team, and I'd write messages on Sunday nights. And what I heard was that they were sharing those with others. And, I had them all saved. And so by the time I got to, from one, I went from one job to another, and my admin there said, "You got a book here. And the first thing you should do is you should give it to a bigger audience." So I started a mailing list like we all have. And before I knew it, there were 7,000 people on that list. Then I built the website so I could have a place to put all the stuff. I had a friend who was visually impaired. He said, "I would much rather hear your voice reading me your messages than to, hear my speech reader machine software do it." And I learned something there, which I think because you narrate your own books, and that is that the final edit is when you read it out loud. That's when you know. Yeah, and there's a nuance associated with that. But I had all this content, and the first 2 books were like super easy to write because all I did was pull the stuff together. I did, I took 26 out of 50 weeks, the best 26. I kind of organized it by, issues, or they're basically in the inspirational world. There's about 5 things that you just keep going over again and again and again, and you keep telling the story different ways. And that's where I learned to write in that space. But what I realized, and I think anybody that has switched genres understands this, is that fiction is totally different. It's a totally different board game. You got to learn where Boardwalk and Park Place are and figure out how to get there.
It is. It's totally different. And Terry and I met just about a year ago at a conference. And at the time, I didn't know about Terry's past life and that he may or may not have had a different name in that past life. But you were in the middle of a complete reinvention. And that in itself is super inspirational. So he's definitely one for you guys to follow. And if you do follow him, be sure and go out and wish him and his wife a happy anniversary today.
Thank you. 42 years. Yeah, 42 years.
Happy anniversary.
She's been an amazing support system all the way through. And we're very lucky because she is a 3-time cancer survivor, had ovarian cancer twice. And there was a time we weren't sure whether or not she was going to be around. And the thing that I think you discover when something like that happens in your life is at that moment, you have been given this second life together.
Yeah. And
every day becomes important. The stuff that bothered you before doesn't matter anymore.
Right.
So your focus and your priorities are completely different. And we have, in a way, cancer was a gift for us because it helped us understand how lucky we were to have one another, but also how lucky we were to have every day. So when I finally decided to quit being a corporate guy, My challenge was I didn't know what I wanted to do. I spent most of my life asking other people, hey, listen, what would you do if you could work for love and not for money? So when my psychiatrist asked me that question, I had no idea. I didn't know. So we decided we would try fiction for a year. And I immersed myself in that. I pretended like I already knew what I was doing, even though I didn't. I went to all the conferences. I met amazing people. And I met Pamela when she was recording this show in Dallas. And I think my only contribution, my only contribution was let's adjust the drapes a little bit so the light is a little bit better on your face. I think that's what I did there.
Terry is a far more experienced broadcaster than I am. Don't let him fool you. And you did a masterful job of presenting yourself as exactly who you were aiming to be, and not letting who you'd been in the past cause any doubts or get in the way of that. And which is a wonderful lesson for anyone looking to reinvent, right? And I've got to tell you guys that I not only know Terry through this, but I now know his wife too, because they are a team and they're working on all this together, which Eric and I really respect, since that's kind of our modus operandi too. But they've both come to my retreat. So I got to spend nearly as many hours with her as I did with Terry. I'm not going to say who my favorite was.
Well, we all know it's her. Everybody loves her. All my bosses have said that she was my biggest career asset. But I think that was part of the attraction, Pamela, is that, you know, the love that you and Eric clearly have for each other is the exact same experience and thing that we feel. So we're naturally, our radar's out for other people who are always loving on each other on social media. And you could tell that they're doing all the neat little things that, I guess the way I used to describe it was never stop doing the things you did to win her in the first place. Exactly. And you and Eric live that life. You're role models of that whole world.
I kind of like him. Oh, well, and you guys, I really want to encourage you. You've got a lot to check out here with Terry, and you can enter that funnel at his website, which is terryshepard.com. TerryShepHerd.com. You've got his wonderful series for children to help them understand and navigate COVID. And you've got his Jessica Ramirez series, with the first book out and the other one upcoming. And you might even be able to swing back and backdoor into some of his nonfiction. But not only that, but you'll be able to grab hold, as he is a co-host of Authors on the Air, which is a super successful podcast, and be able to hear him sit in my chair and interview some of the top authors in the world. So it's a sweet life, Terry. Somebody's got to live it. Might as well be you.
And I'm glad I can live it with you. Thank you so much.
It was really, really fun. Now, you guys, I always have to tell you that Wine, Women, and Writing is a copyrighted and solely owned production by Authors on the Air Global Radio Network. All hail our Uber producer, Pam Stack, from whom all blessings flow, right? She's fantastic. And I do want to remind you, because it is my show, that my novels are available free to you on Kindle Unlimited, or can be obtained in audio or print as well. So check them out. Check Terry's books out. Get on the website, see who I'm having next show, and read ahead. Until then, have a glass of wine for me and read a good book. Thanks for being on, Terry. And thanks, everyone.